fans and media are a lot smarter than John Henry thinks. This long-term future the Red Sox have, how's that working out for them? Welcome everyone to the Monday edition of Fair Territory, and I am still buzzing from the weekend. The Dodgers-Yankees series. Don't worry, we're going to talk about other teams too on the show, players on other teams as well. But if you're a fan of baseball and you watched any of those games this weekend, tell me you weren't compelled by all the stars on the field, by all the drama in the games, even by what was going on outside the stadium. One of my favorite moments from the weekend was this video of Dodgers fans actually marching on Yankee Stadium, marching through the Bronx to get to Yankee Stadium. It was quite a sight to behold, and it was all part of the fun of the weekend. There was definitely a postseason buzz surrounding this series, and there were really some great moments as well. Yoshinobu Yamamoto on Friday night throwing harder than he has in the major leagues, 7 shutout innings, just 2 hits. Saturday, the game that we had on Fox, that was Teoscar's first massive game. Actually, all 3 of his games in New York were massive, but that was the one where he had 2 homers, tied a career high with 6 RBIs, hit a grand slam in the 8th inning, had an epic trot after that. That was just Saturday night. And then Sunday, maybe the most fun game of all, the one that was on ESPN. You saw Grisham in the lineup because Juan Soto was not. Well, Trent Grisham hearing the chants of "We Want Soto" before that one at bat, and then turning those chants into "We Want Grisham" after his big home run. We saw in this game Judge nearly throw out Ohtani at the plate. We saw Judge hit another home run. He is just absolutely on fire. This was just baseball at its finest. And I don't know if it was a postseason preview, a World Series preview. The Phillies are going to have something to say about that. The Orioles will too, as will other teams. But that was a ton of fun. And again, we are going to talk about other things. We're going to talk about the Royals, the Reds, Luis Robert. We're going to get into it all. But that series was something to behold. I wrote today a story with Chris Kirshner, our Yankees beat writer, about where the Yankees are and where they are as they approach the deadline. And we're getting to that point of the season now. We're 7 weeks out from the deadline. And the Yankees, it's similar to what I wrote about the Dodgers a few weeks back. The Dodgers spent $1.4 billion in the offseason. Their team is not complete. The Yankees have a $300 million payroll. Their team is not complete. They have some issues. And Chris and I wrote about 4 of them, and we'll show you those issues here, and I'll talk about them a little bit each, because they're kind of interesting considering what we thought the Yankees would be. Anthony Rizzo at first base, 1 for 29 in June. His underlying metrics are not very good either. You can't say, well, at least he's hitting the ball hard. Not happening for Rizzo either offensively or defensively. Gleyber Torres has revived offensively, been much better since May 1st, but 10 errors at second base. Has had some mental lapses. That dropped pop fly on Friday night was one of them. He just does not look like a consistent guy defensively, a guy you can trust in October. Their bullpen, it's really good, at least from a performance aspect. Second in ERA, cannot argue with that. But strikeout rate is a bit of an issue. They're 22nd in that regard. And that's something that they're going to look to upgrade because they are going to want more swing and miss. Now, what they're going to do with the corner infield, that remains to be seen. You could slide DJ LeMahieu to first, play Cabrera at third if you want. You could acquire another corner infielder, though as Chris and I detail, not going to be so easy to do. So these are areas that will need addressing. And you saw the 4th category there. It was Juan Soto. And what I said was they need him. Well, obviously, they need him. That's why they traded for him. But really, the transformational effect he has had on that lineup cannot be overstated. Him and Verdugo, the 7th lowest strikeout rate in the majors, they have changed a high strikeout lineup, which it still sort of is, into one that has more contact in it, is much more difficult for opposing pitchers to navigate. So the point there is they need Soto healthy. They obviously had a huge scare this weekend. He did not play in the Dodgers series due to that inflammation in his forearm, but the Yankees do not seem to think it's all that serious. So the Yankees, Brian Cashman, their GM, they're going to have some work to do at the deadline, like all teams. But this is a rare opportunity for them. This might be, and I say might be, their best chance of winning the World Series since 2009. They've had some really good teams since, 103 wins in 2019 in particular. But this team, especially with Garrett Cole coming back, remember, he has not thrown a single pitch this season. This team has a chance to do something special. Also this weekend, also on Fox, we had the London series. This was the third time that Major League Baseball has played a game in London. I covered the first two. This one I was assigned to the LA Dodgers-Yankees series instead. And I understand what Major League Baseball is trying to do here, trying to establish a foothold in Europe, trying to grow its fan base to a continent where, let's face it, soccer, cricket are much more popular sports, soccer in particular, all over the continent of Europe. I just wonder if in England, this is anything more than a novelty that comes through once in a while. I remember the two games that I covered there, it was mostly American fans in the stadium, people on vacation. And while London is a huge city, much like New York, you can never tell if one sporting event is having a major impact or not on the entire city. I just don't know if this is going to be worth the squeeze. The juice will be worth the squeeze, to use that phrase. And again, I understand MLB doing this. They had a game scheduled for Paris next year. That was canceled because they could not find a promoter. But we'll see if this continues. I get why MLB plays games in Japan, in Mexico, in baseball-mad countries. Makes sense. Korea is another one. The London game, while a lot of fun, and it's cool to see Major League Baseball in London, and there are some really interesting things going on around the game, I just wonder about the future of this, whether it's going to be really something baseball continues to pursue or whether it considers the whole European experience to be somewhat futile. The game has grown there. The question is whether it's growing enough. SeatGeek is the official ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, and they have you covered for all of your baseball ticket needs. With over 28 million downloads, they are the #1 rated ticketing app. Baseball season is in full swing, and you don't want to miss out. SeatGeek has your tickets to every game and, of course, concerts, festivals, and more. Every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee, and SeatGeek is the only site that lets you return your tickets ahead of the event with swaps. Use our code FAIR for $20 off tickets at SeatGeek. That's $20 off your first purchase with promo code FAIR, and make sure you click the link in the description to download the app. I want to talk about two teams, two lower revenue Midwest teams that have captured my attention and really have captured the attention of everyone in baseball over this early part of the season. And let's start with the Cincinnati Reds. The Reds were reeling earlier this year. They had a ton of injuries. They weren't playing all that well, even though they were running like crazy. There were some people wondering how long David Bell is going to last as manager. And now they've gotten healthier. TJ Friedl is back. He's a huge part of their lineup. Nick Lodolo is back, huge part of their rotation. And suddenly they're playing better. Won 2 of 3 from the Cubs this weekend. They've won 12 of 16 overall. And let's look at the NL Central standings to see where they stand, because their position is improved. It's not great, but it's better than it was. They're tied with the Cubs for second place, 32 and 34. They're right in the middle of that massive NL wildcard mix of mediocrity. There are a number of teams in that mix, and they're one of them now. What's interesting about the Reds is their rotation. It actually is pretty good. People think of Great American Ballpark, of course, as an offensive ballpark, and it is. But with Lodolo, with Hunter Green, with Andrew Abbott, and with Frankie Montas, if he can get right, and Graham Ashcraft, who's in the minors, if he can get right, that's a pretty good group. And offensively, now that Friedl is back, and they're going to get Noelvi Marte back as well, coming off the PED suspension. Candelario's hitting better. They are kind of an interesting offensive team, especially when Ellie De La Cruz is doing his thing. They're second in the second in the major leagues in stolen bases to the Nationals, yet they're only 15th in runs per game. So offensively, they've got to get going. Their rotation ERA, for all the talent I just mentioned, only 16th. But the Reds, from the very start of the season, were looked at as an interesting team, a team that will be fun to watch, a team that has a chance to do some things. And we've seen that over the last 2.5 weeks. The Royals, meanwhile, are one of the better teams in the American League. Right now, they are looking really good. 4 games behind the Guardians in the AL Central. But let's take a look at the wild card standings, because if you look at that, they're in a much firmer position. In the AL wildcard race, the Orioles are way up, 8.5 up. The Royals, though, are next, 4 games behind the Orioles, and 4.5 up on the Twins, who are in the 3rd position. So when you look at where they are compared to the Red Sox, the next team that is out of the wildcard race, they're 6 up. They're in really good shape, and they're in really good shape for good reason. That's the 4th best record in the AL. They're 5th in rotation ERA in the majors. They are 4th in runs per game in the majors. The Guardians are 3rd. Those are 2 teams that you would never have thought would be among the offensive leaders at this point of the season. And they had a skid where they lost 6 of 7, and they kind of looked like maybe they were fading a little bit. And they've come back to win 4 of 6, including that crazy game Friday night when they were down 8-0, came back on the Mariners. They've done this kind of thing all season. Their biggest issue, strikeout rate in the bullpen. They are dead last in strikeout percentage out of the bullpen. That is something that they're going to need to adjust at the deadline or address at the deadline, and I believe they will. They've been aggressive from the offseason on, and this is one thing I've talked about, I love about this team. They went after it in free agency. They got Lugo, they got Waka. Those 2 guys have stabilized their rotation in a way that really they ideally envisioned, and they did some things in the bullpen that haven't worked as well, but they tried. There is value in trying. Time now for the Inside Dish. This is the part of the show where I go inside a story I've written, inside a trend in the game, or maybe talk about something else entirely. And this week fits into the description of something else entirely. I want to talk about the difficulty of players speaking a second language in interviews, how much I respect when they do it in English, and how beneficial it can be when a player can handle that interview in English as opposed to his native tongue. And this came to my mind watching the games this weekend, actually being part of the broadcast this weekend, interviewing Teoscar Hernandez after our Fox game, and then seeing him mic'd up on Sunday night on ESPN, and you could see his personality come out. You can see what a special guy Teoscar Hernandez is, why he was such a popular teammate in Toronto, in Seattle, and now in Los Angeles. Now, what I'm talking about here, is it self-serving? Yes, it's absolutely self-serving. Television interviews with an interpreter, frankly, are not good TV. And they come off as clunky. You've got to get to the interpreter, you've got to get the answer, then translate it, the whole thing. And players can't really show their personality. But let me explain why this matters. And we did see it with Teoscar. It matters because when a player is able to handle these kinds of interviews, it helps them from a brand perspective. It makes them bigger in this country. Fans get to know them better. And this is a difficult thing for players a lot of times because, again, this is not comfortable for them. They are hesitant. They do not want to embarrass themselves. They want to present the best portrait of themselves possible. And this is entirely understandable, of course. Now, there are a number of players from Latin American countries in particular who speak excellent English. Juan Soto is one. Remember Ellie De La Cruz, his first English interview this year in which he said LA is his city. That was after a big game against the Dodgers, the one in which he stole 4 bases. And players like Ronald Acuna Jr. and Rafael Devers, they are trying. They're getting closer to the point where they can do interviews in English. Now, most players, as I said, know some level of English, but again, they do not want to necessarily speak it out of some fear of embarrassment or whatever the case might be. And they also might fear what happened with the Mets' Jorge Lopez a few weeks back, right? His words were misunderstood, and that created a major issue. He was trying to say that he was the worst teammate, and it came off that he was maybe saying the Mets were the worst team. And in that particular case, I thought the Mets were at fault. I thought they should have stepped in, had an interpreter there, step in. I think there was an interpreter there. But for whatever reason, that whole thing went completely awry. That was the night he threw his glove in the stands. He gets DFA'd. I get it. It wasn't a great look all around, but that interview should not have been part of that conversation. Should not have been part of why people were down on Jorge Lopez. So, yeah, you can see and you can understand why players would be reluctant to do interviews in English when their words might not be entirely understood. Now, keep in mind how difficult this is. How difficult it is for a player from another country, be it Japan, Korea, Dominican Republic, Venezuela, to speak English when, in some cases, the Latin American countries in particular, they may have come from impoverished backgrounds where, let's face it, learning English was not a big priority. They're trying to get by every day, right? And beyond that, think about how difficult it would be for you or me to go into a foreign country and need to speak on television in a media setting in a second language. I want all people to really respect this because the enormity of it, the difficulty of it, is something that I don't think can be understated. It's really hard. And one of the biggest regrets of my career is that I did not learn Spanish early. And I did not learn to converse with players in their native tongue because it makes them more comfortable for one thing, and it improves communication. It's just a good thing to do. Now, why didn't I learn Spanish? I wasn't paying attention in high school like most people. And I didn't know I would be a baseball writer one day. And once I got to be a baseball writer, that's when I should have done it. I was 24 when I started. But for whatever reason, I never found the time, and that's on me. So you will see on occasion, television reporters in baseball speak in both languages, interpreting as they go along. Sophia Minnaert on the right, she is the Milwaukee Brewers dugout reporter. She does a great job. And there's JP Morosi, works for MLB Network. He is a master of several languages, including Spanish, and he can do that on a regular basis and does. Those two, it's a credit to them what they are able to do. To me, it gives you the best possible translation, the best possible interpretation. And let's not forget, for years, as the Dodgers dugout reporter, our own Alana Rizzo of Fair Territory and Foul Territory did the same thing, translating as she went along. And again, it's a great skill. It's one I wish I had. Now, you can't expect every player to master English to the point where they're comfortable enough to do an interview. Japanese players in particular do not do television interviews in English, even though guys like Ichiro and Yu Darvish, they are, if not fluent, pretty darn close. They, again, do not want to risk the embarrassment. It's not fair to hold them to a standard that, frankly, I don't know that we would hold ourselves to if we were in a foreign country. Now, I try to make up for this in my writing, giving proper attention to every player, regardless of what language he speaks. And it's easier to get around in writing because you can talk to other people if that player is not particularly conversant, even with an interpreter. So all that said, when a player does what Teoscar Hernandez did this weekend in his interview with me on Fox, and really more expansively in that mic'd up segment with ESPN, you can see how it brings out his personality, how it makes him kind of a bigger deal. Teoscar Hernandez now, well, besides playing great over the weekend, that was the biggest thing. People know him more. They know who he is. They know the kind of guy he is, at least from a public standpoint, and it gives them better insight into the player. That, as media, is what we're always trying to do, give you better insights into the players. So when players can master it, man, it makes it that much better for them. Time now for Grillin Ken. This is the part of the show, of course, where I answer your questions, so let's get right to them. The first one this week comes from Chi Sox Billy, who asked, if the White Sox do in fact trade Luis Robert Jr., what kind of return should Sox fans expect? Billy, this is a really interesting question, and it has two different elements to it that make it a little bit more complex. I don't know that the return for Luis Robert Jr. would be great, and let's look at two reasons why. The first is games played. This guy has not been on the field that much in the past 4 seasons. 2021, 68 games. 2022, 98 games. 23, played 145. He was healthy and great. 2024, this season, he has played only 12 thus far. Now, the other aspect of this, while he doesn't get on the field that much, his salaries are starting to rise. 2024, this current season, his salary is $12.5 million, goes to $15 million next year, and then there are 2 club options valued at $20 million each. Those are not exorbitant salaries for a player of Luis Robert Jr.'s ability. In fact, they're bargains. The question is, will he be on the field to earn that money? And that's the problem that teams are going to look at with Luis Robert Jr. How much do we trust that ability to keep him healthy for him to stay on the field? Now, if he does, those salaries are an absolute bargain, but that's the question. So I would expect it would be a pretty big return, but it wouldn't be Juan Soto-esque. Let's put it that way. He asked this question yesterday. What happened last night when you had to run off the field quickly before first pitch? LOL. I've got a story about this, and actually there was a reason I was running off the field. So on certain nights, on certain games on Fox, we will do an interview with a player literally right before first pitch. And on Saturday night, that player was Freddie Freeman, third hitter that inning. He is a guy who agreed to do it, and we said, okay, here's how we're going to do it, right before first pitch. I've done this before. I did it once with the Phillies last year. Kyle Schwarber was leading off. Trey Turner was the guy we were interviewing. It is dicey. And it's dicey because my interview with the player starts, and it's only one question, as the leadoff man, in this case Mookie Betts, is in the box. Entire stadium is waiting for this thing to go down. The interview with Freddie, I believe, took 13 seconds. That was the whole thing. Question and answer, 13 seconds. So for all you complaining that I was holding up the game, it was 13 seconds. At the same time, it is kind of a hairy thing. And as we were standing there, Freddie's telling me, as Turner was telling me last year when we did this, Kenny, the game is about to start. Let's go. The game is about to start. And I've got to sit there and say, the game's not starting until we do this. And that's kind of how it goes down. But once it was over, the interview, the game was about to start. And yes, I had to run off the field and get into the camera well before Mookie hit a line drive off my noggin. All right, let's move on to the final question. And I like this one a whole lot. This question comes from Bryston Boy at Bartman Blues, who asks, Mr. Henry's comments, Red Sox owner John Henry, are they fair territory? And if you missed it, John Henry, in a recent interview with the Financial Times, talked about fan expectations in Boston and where they are going with this team and all of that. And I want to show you the quote, or at least one of the quotes, that kind of caught people's attention. What Henry had said when asked about the full throttle comment. Remember that from Tom Werner in the offseason when he said the Red Sox would be full throttle this offseason. John Henry said that comment had overshadowed every other word, paragraph, and interview of the winter because it reaches so deeply into the false belief that many fans and media have that you should mortgage the future each year for the present. Guess what? Fans and media are a lot smarter than John Henry thinks. No one suggests you should mortgage the future each year for the present, or at least not a whole lot of people. There might be some knuckleheads out there who say go all in every year. But most fans understand that you can't do that you have to have these cycles, even for the high revenue teams that take place. Here's my problem with John Henry. Here's why he's a strong candidate for Dork of the Week this week. This long-term future the Red Sox have, how's that working out for them? Last place in 2020. 2021, an aberrational year, they got to the ALCS. Last place in 2022, last place in 2023, and 2024, albeit with a ton of injuries, they are a 500 team. Actually, they've done well to get to 500. So this vision that John Henry has, we're talking about 5 years, 2020 to 24, admittedly 2020 was the COVID year, the shortened season. 5 years in which the Red Sox have been good only once. A high revenue team with this long-term vision has been good once in 5 years. I would suggest to John Henry that maybe his fans have a point, that maybe they are right to be upset with the fact that they traded a Hall of Fame player in Mookie Betts rather than sign him, with the fact that they lost Xander Bogaerts. Maybe that was the wise decision in retrospect. But in general, they have not acted like the Boston Red Sox should act. They have not done well in a short-term vision. They have not done well in a long-term vision. They're not doing well, period. I want to thank everyone for watching, for listening. You know where to find us: YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Like us, subscribe to us, and we will see you Thursday when I'll be back with Alana Rizzo for the second edition this week of Fair Territory.
Once a day, you can play the free BetMGM Swing for the Fences game. Chance to win daily prizes. You play as the batter, you pick an area of the strike zone, and then you see what happens. And BetMGM Sportsbook account holders who play the game will have the opportunity to win a reward if they get a hit. Rewards include odds boost tokens, parlay boost tokens, and bonus bets, among other rewards. And all of those rewards, when you get them, expire in 24 hours.
Gambling problem or concern? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Hey everybody, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. Fair Territory airs each week, and we'd love for you to become part of our community. Here's another video you might enjoy. See you next time.